Okay, so the meeting is recorded. So people, if you don't want your voice to be recorded, please refrain from saying anything. And if you don't want your picture to be on the video, then stay away from it, from the camera. So as I was saying, that this is a day that is internationally recognized as Human Rights Day, which was inaugurated by the United Nations after the Second World War to ensure that every human being in this world has got his human rights respected. But I think we are here today because those human rights are not respected in many of the places that we can remember. I mean, they're not respected in Palestine, they're certainly not respected in Kashmir, and there are other parts of the world where human rights are being violated on a daily basis. So I think today we are going to look at situation in many parts of the world, and particularly in Palestine and in Kashmir, and see what we can do from here in Britain, because human rights, even in Britain, are not actually fully respected. Because even today's decision by the High Court to allow Assange to be sent extradited to the United States is against his human rights, and hopefully he's going to be challenging that decision in the Supreme Court, and hopefully his appeal would succeed. So that's what we are here for. So before we go any further, can I ask a young man, Salahuddin, to come and recite a few verses from the Quran? You can come here. And
sit on the chair and then read.
Okay, go ahead.
ألم نشرح لك صدرك
أعوذ بالله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. Have we not expanded for you your breast and taken off from you your burden, which pressed heavily upon your back, and exalted for you your esteem? Surely with difficulty is ease, with difficulty is surely ease, and make your Lord your exclusive object.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask Suleiman to come and say a few words?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can I first of all welcome all of you to this meeting jointly organized by Tahreek-e-Kashmir, Birmingham, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and
Somebody else's phone.
is to highlight.
Hello, Assalamualaikum. Not a present. I'm on Zoom. Okay, you're right.
You done her, but
Okay, I'll call you when I finish. All right.
yeah, you them.
We can start.
So the purpose of this meeting is to highlight human rights being abused wherever they are. You know, on this earth, we are one human family. Color, nationality, we put aside. As a human being, I am concerned what happened to those refugees and asylum seekers who drowned in the English Channel. And look at those people who are in power, like the French government and the British government, not taking any responsibility, but blaming the refugees. You know, nobody leaves his home unless he is forced to leave home. I am concerned about what is happening in Palestine. because people were uprooted who lived there for thousands of years, and settlers came from Europe, from America, from Britain, from other places, and still this is going on. And people are, suffering in Palestine. Look at the state of Gaza, what's happening in there. I am concerned about Kashmir because I come from Kashmir. And I know from 1947 up to now, we have been suffering. 13 million people of Kashmir want to determine their future. But 8 million people are living under occupation. Brothers, we are very lucky. We don't live under occupation. If you live under occupation, you'll find out. See what happens when a person from occupied Kashmir goes out, he'll be searched by the army. Ask where is he going? He can be arrested. There are so many laws that are put in there to arrest people. Rough estimate is that there are over 30,000 people in Indian jails, Kashmiris. And the solution Indian state thinks for Kashmir is to use force. So they send in 1.2 million soldiers who are in war with the people of Kashmir, in war, because military high command of India have said to their government, look, solution to the Kashmir problem is negotiation. We can't resolve this issue by brutal force. But Narendra Modi said, no, you have to use brutal force. And when India uses brutal force in Kashmir, you see the results. Only the other day, 3 youngsters were killed by the Indian army. 3 youngsters who were doing nothing wrong. They were not throwing stones at the Indian army. They were killed. Their blood was spilled on the street of Srinagar. And people came to wash that blood of martyrs. And their mothers were there. And they saw this blood with their own eyes. And, they were crying. Of course, naturally you cry when your son is killed by the army. They're crying, but their slogan was Azadi. We want freedom. So we send a message today to India and to this British government that you have a historical responsibility to resolve this issue through negotiation. And we say to Narendra Modi, by using force, you're only creating more hatred. And the more hatred you create, the more problem you'll create for your country. The best thing is to settle this issue through the United Nations, through plebiscite, which was promised to the people of Kashmir. There are many of other speakers who will speak. Thank you very much.
Can I ask Dr. Khurram Bashir to come and say a few words?
This video spin. If you take off pin, speaker.
Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When Brother Haja Sahab phoned me today in the late afternoon, so I just, as all of us, we go to Baba Google first. So I went, seeing today is the 10th of December in 1948, the basic rights, human rights were enshrined in UN resolutions. Then I have a very beautiful book lying in my library, Bunyadi Hukuk, by late Jasarat's editor and Takbir's editor, Muhammad Salahuddin. So I have gone through, written a few points for you. What are the hukuk Islam's duty? So because of many speakers, I will just make a mention and 1 or 2 hadiths. So we start from safety of life. So everyone knows that Quran says وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't slay each other. وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. If someone gives life to someone, as he has given life to the humanity at large. Then number 2 is the security of ownership. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Don't take your properties and money with vain and false way. Safety of honor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, safety of property. If someone is killed, saving his property, securing his property, he is regarded as shaheed. Likewise, safety of honor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like La yuhibbullahu al-jahra bis-su'i min al-qawli illa man zulim. Security, next is security of private and family life. Istizan, to seek permission in Islamic way. Surah Nur goes, chapter number 24 goes in detail. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تدخلوا بيوتا غير بيوتكم حتى تستأنسوا وتسلموا على أهلها. Then personal freedom. When we say personal freedom, we say إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. So no one has superiority. لا فضل لعربي على العجمي ولا لعجمي على العربي. That no one got, superiority. Although Allah has acknowledged in chapter 49, verse 13, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min zakarin wa unsa. O people, we have created you from single parenthood, female and male, and make you tribes and nations so that you know each other, not despise each other. However, the criteria of nobility in Islam is taqwa and piety. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable in the sight of Allah is the most pious, which is open for everyone. No collective punishment. Here, someone was talking about Kashmir. There's a lot of collective punishment going on in Kashmir. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited that. فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. Right of standing against persecution. أَفْضَلُ الْجِهَادِ كَلِمَةُ الْحَقِّ إِنَّ سُلْطَانٍ جَائِرٍ. The best form of jihad. Jihad is striving and struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is saying having truthful expression in a tyrant ruler, in front of a tyrant ruler. Just few more. Right of expression. Amar bil maruf and nahi anil munkar. You will find so many incidents in Quran and Hadith of prophetic time of rightly guided caliphs, that you stand firm for the truth and you command good and forbid evil. Right to religion and consciousness. Islam says, La ikraha fid deen, let there be no coercion, no compulsion. Muslims ruled India over 900 years, but the Indian great majority remained non-Muslims. So this is the best proof of Islamic tolerance and Islamic giving freedom to everyone. Finally, al-adl. The whole universe is standing on adl, on justice. So Quran categorically says, and that other, not only political and judicial, but also Islam says economical. Let not the wealth circulate among your rich people. So Islam wants adl in every aspect of life. And Islam says in political adl, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. There's a whole surah in Quran. And may Allah give us tawfiq to search our Islamic identity and go to Kitab and Sunnah, and let Muslim countries, which give very bleak picture as far as human rights are concerned, even in our beloved country, motherland, Pakistan, you will find there are people who are taken away by agencies and you will not find their whereabouts, and their families are searching again and again. Let us put a good picture of Islam by our deeds, personally and collectively.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir. Can I now ask Fahim Kiani?
Shaista Safi.
Can we not do?
Yeah, she's there.
Is she in a hurry to leave? Or?
I don't know. Probably. Shaista, do you want to speak? She's there. Shaista.
Shasta, do you want to speak first, or you will wait?
Let me hear some of the speeches and then I can.
Okay,
add
thank you.
in. Thank you.
Okay, Fahim Kiani next will speaking. Is the president of Tahreek-e-Kashmir in Pakistan, in Britain.
First of all, I would like to thank Khwaja Sulaiman Sahab, Tahreek-e-Kashmir UK, founding member, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and Stop the War Coalition for organizing this event jointly. As you know that today is International Human Rights Day, and the people around the world are observing this day to remind the world human rights are very important. And United Nations has given a theme to this International Human Rights Day. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and respect and all rights. If you look at all the articles of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which protects all basic rights of human being, but we see all those human rights are being violated in Kashmir, Palestine, and many countries in the world. We got a Palestinian speaker. He will talk about what's happening in Palestine, but I want to share a few things about Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. People of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir have been living under Indian occupation, subjugation, and oppression for last 73 years. I will keep it short. As Khwaja Sulaiman Sahab mentioned about what happened in last few weeks, few Kashmiris were murdered, were martyred in fake encounters, and one of the martyred, his name is Altaf, but when his daughter when his daughter approached Indian Army and she asked, why you killed my father and what was crime of my father, and that officer laughed at her. But it's not only that officer is laughing, I can see the world leaders are laughing on all those people who are being oppressed by brutal dictators or occupiers. I can give you an example. Today, Joe Biden is holding a democracy summit, and he has invited more than 100 people from different countries, and India is on that table as well. We all know that India is the biggest violator of human rights violations and biggest violator of United Nations resolutions as well. And those resolutions protect basic and fundamental right of the people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which is right to self-determination. Whenever the people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir demand the basic and birthright right of self-determination, they face bullets, they face torture, their women get raped by Indian Army. You have seen all those video clips on social media, how Indian Army is killing innocent Kashmiris in fake encounters. how women are being raped in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Lots of times we have shared these statistics with you, but we have to remind again and again, because oppressor wants us to forget all these things. Once we forget all these things, so this is a victory of oppressor. We shouldn't forget what oppressor has done to us. We must keep reminding to the world, we are the people who are the worst victims of brutal Indian occupation. More than 100,000 people have been killed so far. More than 13,000 women have been raped in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Mass graves were found in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Since 5th August 2019, more than 30,000 Kashmiri have been arrested and sent to different jails of India. We don't know about them. Are they alive or dead? And their families don't know about them as well. The person who introduced the terminology of half widows, Khurram Parvez, the half widow terminology is only used in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir because those women don't know their husband alive or dead. That person, Khurram Parvez, who is human rights defender, who told the world what happened to those women and what happened to those enforced disappearances, and he gave a terminology to those women, half widows, and we have seen that terminology was used in many human rights reports. That person was arrested because he was reporting facts from the ground, what kind of Indian army committing atrocities in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So if high profile person like Khurram Parvez get arrested under anti-national laws, under terrorism laws, so what's happening with those Kashmiris which are not high profile, which they don't have a say? I'm just gonna conclude with one thing. Recently, one I think so his name is Kashif Naik, his father approached me. He said his son was studying in Islamic University in Islamabad, and he was just a student. He went to Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and he was coming back to after his holidays. He was coming back to Islamabad. He was arrested at Srinagar airport, and he was sent to Indian jail, and he was charged with the terrorism laws. So I can understand United Nations reporters have raised their voice about Khurram Parvez. What about those youth like Kashif Naik and others which have no say? So we need to raise all those people. We need to become a voice of all those people which don't have a say, which are not high profile. So we need to submit all those reports, and we need to write to our MPs. They should raise their voice about illegal detentions, about rapes, about fake encounters. So the first, I already told you, we must not forget what happened to us. If people ask us what is the outcome of these program, the outcome of these programs are, we must keep this campaign alive, because India wants to eliminate this issue at international level. India doesn't want Kashmir issue to be internationalized. So at the end, I'm very thankful to Khwaja Sulaiman Sahab, Brother Naeem, who have set up all this Zoom meeting as well. We got speakers on live as well. They're going to share their views as well. So once again, I'm very thankful to, inshallah, Kashmir will be free, Palestine will be free, and we are not, when it comes to the condemning human rights violations, we are not a selective. Wherever the human rights violations being committed by any oppressor, we oppose all those oppressors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fahim. Can I ask now, Stuart? I think we are running short of time, so I would urge the speakers to keep it as brief as possible.
Yeah.
He's speaking on behalf of Birmingham Stop the War.
Yes, brothers and sisters, thank you for the invitation to this meeting. And we're very, very pleased as Stop the War Coalition, we've got a number of our supporters here today supporting this event. I want to talk really about the Julian Assange case, although I will comment on Kashmir. If you go home tonight and watch the BBC, they might actually show Stella Morris, his fiance, speaking, who talks about the killers from the CIA and the torturers of the CIA and Julian Assange exposing that, and then raising the hypocrisy of how can you give assurances for the safety of Julian Assange if the CIA had active discussions with the Secretary of State, with the President of the country, planning his kidnapping and murder. It's utterly ridiculous. So we have a very, very important battle here, because we have a battle for journalistic freedom and basic rights, and the right of journalists to get files and expose those war crimes. And if people have not seen it, there's a famous video of a helicopter hovering around central Baghdad, shooting 19 people, including 2 Reuters journalists. And that's why they want to get him, because they hate that exposure of their war crimes in such a dramatic way. And they hate the fact that on BBC television, in general, if you watch BBC television, it's tame, it's an establishment. Nobody ever talks about American war crimes. Nobody ever talks about the killings and the torture inflicted by the CIA. But that has been said on British television today, and that's one of the wonderful expose of them. There will be an appeal. They'll probably go on for 6 or another year. Stop the War comrades have actually been down to the court demonstrating, and will be down there again supporting our national comrades. Just to say on Kashmir, the thing that really strikes me about it is that we have this talk about genocide of the Uyghurs. Now, clearly the Uyghur community in Western China are repressed. They are subject to religious discrimination, and their culture is being attacked. But even the Uyghurs don't say there's mass killings there. They don't say, as was reported by famine, that 100,000 Uyghurs have been killed. But that is the dramatic in the news. That is often on the headlines, as it was yesterday. Is there any mention of Kashmir? Is there any mention of the human rights abuses, the killings, the sexual violence? No. And it was very good that a number of us from Stop the War and from the Kashmiri community went to the BBC a couple of weeks ago and demonstrated against them and demanded that they start reporting honestly and factually the reality of Kashmir. So I don't want to go on too long. We think that's an important campaign. We will be showing some of our literature and other placards later, but solidarity with your meeting and the struggle for human rights is a long but very important battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Can I now ask Ghalib to come and share a few moments with us and express his views on human rights?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm not going to repeat what has already been said. I think Fahim has covered about the Kashmir, and we have a Palestinian speaker as well. We're going to talk about Palestine. In November only, I just give you the updates. What's happening in November? Only 20 people have been killed in the occupied Kashmir, and since 1989, 95,000 people have been killed. And these human rights abuses is taking place in occupied Kashmir, which is not only 8 million people. There's a total 12.5 million people of the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. There are two regions of the Kashmir, which is one called Jammu and the other one called Kashmir. And this is the census of 2011. That is 12.5 million people in the occupied Kashmir, and there is nobody allowed. Like someone already mentioned there, this student went to Kashmir, and when he was coming back, he's not allowed to come back. So if somebody is not allowed to come back, come out, nobody is allowed to go in. So this is the situation in the Indian occupied Kashmir. And who's the responsible of this? We are observing this 10th of December, the International Human Rights Day. And those countries who are violating the human rights, they are also observing this day. So you can imagine what's going on. And the United Nations, which is supposed to be supposed to stop this human rights violation, they are completely silent. And if you look at the two reports published on Kashmir in the last couple of years, the two reports of United Nations Human Rights Commission, the headquarters in Geneva, they published two reports, but India is not allowed anybody to go into occupied Kashmir to see what's going on. So I think the total responsibility is on the United Nations, and the total responsibility of those countries who are the permanent member of Security Council. They are actually responsible of all this killing. And when there is no justice, then there's a frustration, and then there's no peace. So this is what happening in some of the places in the world, like Palestine and Kashmir. So the United Nations, I think, is totally to blame. If you look at when Modi came to Glasgow in November, 1st or 2nd of November, I have seen with my own eyes the Secretary General of the United Nations. He was hugging the Modi. So what can you expect, and what can you say that the United Nations is going to give the justice? And then when there's no justice, then there's always a war, and we have seen two world war, and we're heading to the third one now, because the people of Kashmir and people of Palestine, they're going to continue their struggle for their right of self-determination and the human rights, and all the democratic and human rights people in the world, whether it's Muslim, non-Muslim, anyone you can say, they are protesting. If you remember when there was a protest on Iraq by the Stop the War Coalition, millions of people attended that, million people. But the United Nations and our own government, even they're very silent on Kashmir and Palestine, and these issues obviously which has been created by Britain, Palestine and Kashmir. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ghalib. Now, can I ask Marwan? He's from Palestine. He's a lecturer at Coventry University, and he's going to speak about the status of human rights in Palestine, but also some of the successes we've had in Britain as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to start by saying that in 1948, the majority of the Palestinian land and people being expelled. And later on in 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights, which is still until today is occupied. There are two laws that is relevant for people who's under occupation. First, the international humanitarian law, which says that occupying countries should protect people in time of war and conflict. And the other law is the international human rights law. These two laws are supposed to be the framework for the world in a situation of conflict and war. As we know that Israel is still occupying the West Bank or the occupied Palestinian territory since 1967. Both laws are based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which has been adopted by the UN in 1948 and being changed and modified since then. which is basically saying that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights without distinction of any kind. The declaration or the international human rights law also says that the right to life, people should live, liberty and security of people. And it prohibits slavery and torture and arbitrary arrest. It also, the declaration says that acknowledge the universal right to equality before the law, that all of us are equal for social security and adequate standard of living, that all should have access to basic standard of living, and that there should be no discrimination between people based on their race, nationality, or religion, and the right to freedom of thought. So if these are the principles that guiding the international human rights, so if we look at it even more specifically, it says that civilian and victims of war should be protected. If you look at the situation in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Kashmir, this is not happening. The opposite is what's happening. Both laws state that the occupation is by definition is temporary. In other words, it's not forever. As we can see from the Palestine and Kashmir, it's been more than 50 or so years. And that the occupier is never a sovereign in the occupied territory, that they are not the sovereign responsible for them. As we know, both in the case of Kashmir and Palestine, they actually behave as a sovereign. It says also in the basis of this law that the occupier may not make a permanent changes in the occupied territory. If you look at Kashmir and Palestine, both India and Israel is making changes that you will not be able to recognize the West Bank in the last, if you compare it to 50 years ago. Roads, settlements, control of the resources, the water. So all this is in violation of this law. Also, the law says clearly the occupying power may not change the law that apply in the occupied territory. Israel is imposing. In Israel, there are two laws, one for the settlers, Jewish settlers, and one for the Palestinians. They build permanent settlements there, and they exploit, as I said, the resources, the land, the water, the border. And another principle of the law, that no collective punishment or violence, the closure of Gaza, the siege of Gaza, the fact that people can't travel from Jerusalem to the West Bank or from West Bank to go to Al-Aqsa. These are part of collective punishment. And that their land, again, it says, property may not be confiscated. Almost 50 or 54% of the land in the West Bank is under Israeli control. Another point that I wanted to mention, that over the years, on the basis of this law, different let's say conventions, different treaties being formed. Specifically, I want to mention one, and with that I'll finish. The Convention on the Rights of Children and the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, Degrading Treatment and Punishment. Both of them, all these conventions Israel is signatory to them, and in the case of children, at the moment, there are few thousand kids under the age of 18 being in prison in Israel, which is in violation of the international law and the Child Convention. There are more than 5,000 prisoners that had never been taken to the court under administrative detention, tortured, imprisoned, without any charge. And there is just now a case of one person. He is in a hunger strike. He is refusing to eat now more than 120 days. And he's saying, I am not going to stop until you will tell me why you are arresting me. What is the charges that you have against me? The last point that I want to make is all this is very important. We are aware of this violation. However, the main problem, the main drawback of this international laws is the fact that the absence of effective enforcement of them. There is no mechanism. Israel, the number of times it violated this international law, we know many, many times. There is nobody who can yet that enforce these laws and put pressure on Israel to stop them. The same, obviously, in the case of Kashmir. Probably the only way, or one of the ways of creating this change is through the international solidarity, the boycott, the divestment, and the fact that you are holding a meeting like this today. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, Naeem, for again organizing this in behalf of Palestine Solidarity. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marwan. I think there's going to be an opportunity for people to ask questions after all the speakers have spoken. I think we've got the last speaker, that's Shaista Safi. She's actually from the occupied Kashmir, and she's going to be speaking to us about the situation in Kashmir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers for organizing this timely event. We are all gathered here today because today was the day when Human Rights Declaration came to existence. And my brother from Palestine, when he was reading out all the articles of Human Rights Declaration, he was making a comparison to it, what's happening in Palestine. I completely felt like Kashmiri is speaking, or I completely relate to what Palestinians are going through. Because if we read all the articles from 1 to 30, and even not a single article is being respected when it comes to these occupations. If I talk about Indian occupied Kashmir, even the first, the most important article of Human Rights Declaration, the right to life, we don't have right to life. Indian occupational forces are there not to secure us, but to kill us. They are the occupational forces. They are there to kill us. You may give them any name. India may call them Indian security forces. But if you see the history and if you see their deeds, you'll understand that they are there to kill us, to maim us, to rape us, to torture us, to discriminate us, to humiliate us in our own homeland. This is what Indian occupational forces are there for. When a Kashmiri child is born, he's born under 12 lakh Indian occupational forces. He's not even born free. We are not even given the right to live, right to speak. We don't have right to express ourselves. Even today, if I give you just example of today, we are talking about the right of expression and freedom of expression. Today, a Jammu Kashmir Bank employee, she expressed emoji on the news of Bipin Rawat death, and that was a laughing emoji. And she was suspended from her job. But if we see just few weeks back, as Fahim Bhai mentioned, that daughter of Altaf Ahmed Butt, who was a civilian that was killed in extrajudicial killing, we saw that when it was asked her, she said that when I asked the police personnel why you killed my father, they started laughing. No one was suspended. On the other hand, people are being suspended even if they give an emoji on Facebook because they are Kashmiris and they are expressing themselves. But occupational forces, are they in police or in army, they're not even suspended, even asked question if they kill us, if they even laugh on our deaths. They're not asked anything. They are not being suspended because they have all the impunity. Because they are there, as I said earlier, they are there to kill us. If we go through, we don't have time to go through, my brother from Palestine has already gone through all the articles. Political prisoners are in Indian occupied Kashmir. Asya Andrabi, the woman political prisoner, she has been now in jail in Tahreek jail, the most infamous jail in India, just because she raised flag of freedom, because she talked about the right of self-determination. Our political prisoners like Yasin Malik, Shabir Shah, Musarat Alam, they're all in jail. Qasim Faktu, they are all the Nelson Mandela of Kashmir. But international community very carefully ignored to mention them. My brother for Palestine talk about demographic changes in Palestine. The same Israeli-styled colonial system is now being implemented in Indian occupied Kashmir. Demographic changes are at the peak, at the highest peak right now in Indian occupied Kashmir. Domiciles are being, they are being like distributed like candies and toffees amongst the non-Kashmiris. And if tomorrow the plebiscite happens, all these non-Kashmiris will be allowed to vote. And you all know who they will vote for. Extrajudicial killing is now at the, right now, it is the hottest thing that India can think of. We have seen how many extrajudicial killings India has done in last few months. Mass graves, even United Nations have written reports on mass graves and still nothing has happened. Fahim Kiani talked about the half widows of Kashmir, the special term that is only coined for Kashmiri women. We have orphans as well. Those children who don't know either they are orphan or will their father return. Imagine the dilemma. Imagine the mental health of such children and such people. We talk during the COVID, the most important thing that the media talked about was the mental health. Imagine what the mental health would be of the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, because we all saw the lavish type of lockdown during the COVID, but we, the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, have seen the curfews, not the lavish lockdowns, the lockdowns where the occupational forces have all the power to kill us. Even we don't have the milk for our children to provide to them, or the medical services for people who have underlying health conditions. This is the occupation we are living in, and this is what we have to remind the world. We have to remind every time, as Fahim Kiani rightly said, that remembrance is existence. We have to remember these days when we have to remind people that if even you try to forget us, we won't let you forget us. We are here to remind you that these laws are written by you, these articles are written by you, but these laws are violated against us. They are used against us. So we'll keep on raising the voices and we'll keep reminding the world that from Palestine to Kashmir, occupation is a curse. And we can understand what our Palestinian brothers and sisters are going through because we are in the same boat. That's why we should be together in raising the voice against the occupiers, against this occupation that is a curse, that is a cancer in its nature. And we need to cure that. And we won't just sit down if they give us the lollipops or the band-aids, because cancer is not cured by the band-aids. You can't cure us with those band-aids. We have to cure this cancer of occupation. And together we can, with awareness, with such programs as you people have organized today. This is how we can play our part. And we have to play our part, whether it is a small part or whatever kind of a part it is, but we have to play our part. And tomorrow we'll be answerable for this. And Kashmiri people of Kashmir, they have shown their courage and resilience. They are raising their voice. They are coming up on the streets, be it women or the children or the men. They are on the streets protesting. They are showing their courage and resilience. It is our time now. It is our part to make those voices heard and make the voices from the ground heard on the international platforms. I thank you all for listening, and just a reminder that remembrance is existence, and we have to remember what the people of Kashmir and people of Palestine are going through. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shaista. I think before we move on to the Q&A, I just want to share with you some of the successes we've had as well in terms of fighting for human rights. And I think in the last few weeks, we've had 2 court rulings that have actually encouraged us on certainly on the question of Palestine. One was JCB. This is a company that supplies building machinery for actually building houses, offices, and bridges and everything else. It's a very major company. It's a privately owned company, a British company that was taken to court, and they lost the case. And what the court case said is the JCB is actually breaking the law. So they should actually be punished. And I think we are now pushing for that. What they were doing was they were supplying building equipment to the Israeli occupation in West Bank, which were then demolishing Palestinian houses in Jerusalem and the rest of the West Midlands. So that was a great success. The other, not very far from here, just about 20 miles from here, there's a factory, and Albert factory, which manufactures engines for the drones that is supplied to the Israeli occupation again for attacking people in Gaza and also for monitoring everybody in West Bank. Now, the people from Palestine Action, which is a group that actually targets these companies who are actually violating the international law, and occupied that factory several times over the last, I think over the last 20 years. But last time they occupied it this year, and 3 of them were taken to court. The court decided that they were trying to prevent a greater evil, and therefore they were the cases against them were dismissed. So I think that's another success. So I think if we persevere, we can actually achieve something. And if we persevere, we are hoping that that Shanstone factory would be closed. So I think when we were fighting for people who were actually in Guantanamo, there was a factory that manufactured chains in Handsworth that closed down because of the protest outside that factory. I think same thing should happen to Shanstone. But this court ruling was a great success for people who are actually fighting for human rights, and particularly on the question of Palestine. So thank you very much, Shaista, for sharing your views on us. Now, I'll ask everybody who's on the Zoom, if they want to ask a question or want to make a comment, could they raise their hand?
Are you muted them or they muted?
No, I'll ask them to mute once
We
they.
had a Commonwealth game as well. We can push for this one.
Yeah, we can come to the questions. Anybody asking Q&A? Okay, if not, then can I ask the audience here if they want to ask and raise a question? Yes, go on.
I just want to make a point, the fact.
Can you come near?
I don't know what I'm dressing here. So I welcome everybody attending today's Human Rights Day, celebration of human rights across the world. Just want to say, obviously, various speakers have highlighted ongoing issues around the world, such as the flashpoint area of Kashmir and also Palestine. So we stand in solidarity to the people there. Also the fact that the UK government is looking at this present time, most recently being stated to scrap the Human Rights Act, and also to stop people from protesting as well with the Peace and Crime Bill. These are all infringements of human rights. So the Declaration, which is reiterated by previous speakers, 1948 Declaration of Human Rights. This has been infringed upon as well. So we must still continue to raise our voices on every platform to ensure that people do have the rights of a fair trial, self-expression, as mentioned previously by Stop the War Coalition, in terms of the Julian Assange trial, who is Julian Assange is facing 175 years imprisonment if he's extradited to the United States for exposing war crimes in Iraq. So these are all examples, prime examples of what's happening in the world in terms of infringement of human rights. So as Shaista mentioned earlier, the Kashmir activist The fact is that people in Kashmir are having no rights, have no rights to life, to liberty and security. And this is something that most of the international community, especially British citizens, do have the luxury of. At least we had the opportunity for curfews to end last year, but in Kashmir, there's no light of knowing the end of day when the curfew is going to end. So I just want to stand in condemnation what's happening in Kashmir, Palestine, and what happened in Afghanistan most recently. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else? Yep.
I'm not going to make a speech. So
Go on.
It's nice to hear people highlight the issues in Palestine and Kashmir. I'm a little disappointed nobody mentioned the recent lynching of an innocent Sri Lankan citizen in Pakistan. And we talk about giving minorities their rights and protection and all that, and yet in a society like Pakistan, a supposedly Islamic country, they don't exist. And people, even these scholars or so-called scholars, they're not coming out condemning such issues. And yet, I mean, it's easy making speeches and quoting, Quranic verses and everything, and yet we're not really practicing them ourselves.
Well, I
we
think
need to show the people how it's done, rather than just.
I mean, if I want to answer that to you quite categorically, that we condemn what happened in Sialkot that day. And it is a great shame for us as Muslims. It is a great shame for us as who originated from Pakistan that happened in our country.
Yeah.
So I think we condemn it completely. We would condemn it if it happened anywhere
This is
else.
not a state
And
terrorism. This is individual cases in every
but
country.
anyway, I think that's the first thing. Can I just please finish? Right. So that's the first thing I would say to you. All right. We, as those who are fighting for human rights, would not tolerate those things, and we will condemn those when they happen. And if the state is responsible, we will argue against the state as well. So I think Suleiman wanted to say a few things.
So you see, when this thing happened, right, the whole of Pakistan nation come out and condemn this. The Prime Minister to person on the street. These are criminal people who done criminal act, and they've been arrested and they'll be punished. So don't blame the whole of Pakistani nation on this. It's just the criminal people who done this. But I want to raise two important issues. One is this bill that is going through Parliament, which is police and crime bill, which will prevent us from holding meeting like this, and also prevent us from protesting against atrocities in Kashmir and in Palestine, because the Israelis and the Indian government have been lobbying Boris Johnson. Secondly, I have a British citizenship, and the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister is telling me this was a privilege. I don't think it was a privilege. My grandfather came here in 1950s, and he worked in an acid factory for 30 years. My father came here in the 60s, and he worked here 40 years in a foundry, and he was burning in fire and working all his life. I left school when I was 16, work all my life. I earned this citizenship, not a privilege. It's not a privilege. So I contributed to this country, and I have a right to keep this citizenship. How dare this Home Secretary is seeking power to revoke my citizenship. So we brothers have to wake up and fight for our rights, and that's the problem. There's a slogan out there, kill the bill. Can you all say kill the bill?
Kill the bill.
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 Anybody else to make a comment? Yep.
Just updating what Brother has said about scholars. In Pakistan, scholars from all the walks of life, all the various Jamaat, and they condemned it without any condition. Unconditionally, they condemned what happened in Sialkot. And over 137 people are put in the prison. So Pakistani whole nation was in condemnation of that. And as it has been said, that Pakistani state never encouraged this and never condoned this.
This Maulana Fazlur Rahman, he
He has explained it afterwards. He has, afterwards, he has explained his, and he has given unconditional condemnation.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
Unconditional.
Yeah, but what?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is clear to all of us that, you know, when it comes to violation of human rights, you can't sort of be half-hearted or yes or no here or there. But also, you know, we can't expect everybody in any context in Palestine or other places. We have also internal violation in Palestine, but I can't expect everybody in Palestine to stand against it. I will lobby, I will work towards that. What struck me about today, I live in Bearwood, about 4 miles or so from here. I drove, I came here to this mosque. I know hundreds, maybe thousands of Palestinians who couldn't go to the mosque in Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa. We, probably anybody here could take a flight, go to Tel Aviv and go to Jerusalem to Al-Aqsa. A Palestinian who lives maybe 2 miles, 3 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles away from Jerusalem cannot go and pray there. So that is the absurdity of sort of the democracy of Israel in the Middle East. That is what we need to expose, that there isn't this type of this democracy, that there is a democracy to one group, one ethnic group, that even within that ethnic group, within Israel, even there isn't equality among citizens there. So that's what I will want us to really remember, that the basic right for people to travel. I could travel from Beirut to here. People couldn't do that in Palestine to travel even within the areas itself, between area A, B, and C. You know, you be in Ramallah, but you can't go to the Jordan Valley easily. Yeah, you definitely couldn't go to Jerusalem. And if you want to go to Bethlehem, you have to go around maybe 50 miles of an hour or so, while you could do it if you go straight through Jerusalem, it would be 20 minutes. So these are the basic violations that every day affecting people and every day affecting people suffering as a result of it.
Okay.
In terms of the achievement, there is also very important the International Court, the International Criminal Court in The Hague. There are several cases now on the pipe to take Israeli generals, Israeli politicians who are accused with genocide, particularly in the case of Gaza. So that is another where we can push.
Okay. I think there is somebody from the Zoom meeting who wants to make a comment. It's Tariq Mahmood. Tariq, can you?
Yes, thank you very much, Naeem. And I think it's important it's fantastic you've all met in Birmingham and raised the idea of human rights and its violation in Palestine and Kashmir. And having been involved in fighting for some sort of basic human rights and basic civil rights as well, throughout my life, I've come to realize, and also fighting with many people in the room, I've come to realize it's not what those in power do that matters, but what it is we do ourselves. And therefore, we should not assume that there is any way our human rights will be respected. As we all know, today we became all but second-class citizens. My children will no longer have the right to, well, they could be denied the right to British citizenship without ever being told why, or the right to appeal. That is the current law. If they can't go anywhere, they can certainly go to prison. It's an unacceptable thing. But because we're dealing with Kashmir and Palestine today, how could this impact us? The British government and Priti Patels of this world are in alliance with the financial markets of Indian capital, of Zionist capital, and under those circumstances, they will go for that which lines the pockets of the capitalist class. And if we are not careful, they are going to penalize and punish two fundamental communities in this country. One is the Kashmiris, the other is the Palestinians. To the speaker who questioned earlier on about the terrible death of Priyantha in Pakistan, I asked Naeem to read a poem which I've sent to him on WhatsApp by a very famous Pakistani poet. The poem itself is in Punjabi. I helped to translate it earlier on this week. Now, horrors happen all over the place. Let us not be deflected. We do not hold every Jew accountable for the treatment of Zionists. We do not hold every white person accountable for the racism that they do. We do not hold every Brit accountable for the million deaths in Iraq or the 20 years of carnage that takes place in Afghanistan. Absolutely not. But we do hold the regimes of these societies accountable. And by the same logic, all Muslims are not responsible for the horrors committed in the name of Islam. All Pakistanis are not responsible for the horror committed in Pakistan. That does not mean my heart does not bleed with Priyantha's family. It does. It's one of the murders that affected me very widely. I'm so proud to have participated with all of you today, commemorating the struggles of the Palestinians and the Kashmiris. And our struggles have only just begun. Because they can repress us does not mean we can't unite and fight against them. But I won't take any more of your time. And one of the speakers mentioned Ashia Andravi. I met her in Srinagar in '89, I believe it was, where she told me about how the people were being thrown and murdered and thrown into the river. I know you may not find it hard to believe, but I actually filmed in a river where I saw the bodies flying down, and she said they gouge out the eyes. Believe it or not, I actually filmed a body without eyes in a river. And now she's in jail, is what I heard. I didn't realize until today. I'm a little bit unconnected to the most recent news of the last year or so. But most importantly is that we can change the future that is being denied by the forces of the past. They cannot have Kashmir. The Indian regime cannot have Kashmir, and neither can the Pakistanis. Let's not forget that as well. Kashmir and Palestine have a history that belongs to the peoples of those countries. Obviously, if Kashmiris want to go with India, let it be. I'm a Kashmiri too. Let them go to Pakistan if that is what they want. But most importantly, if Kashmir wants to stand as an independent nation on this earth, let it be. And please, Naeem, read the poem so that no one is under any illusion as these sectarian murders take place, where we all stand. And that has not happened in Britain when we get murdered on these streets. And I have been on many a murdered demonstration in Birmingham, in Manchester, in Southall, in East London. I never saw white people claiming and self-punishing themselves, so they shouldn't as well, because they're not all responsible for our death, only those who remain silent. Thank you, Naeem. Please, if you could read the poem.
You want to read it yourself, or?
Yeah, I'm dyslexic. I can write and translate. I just can't read out aloud. When I read, the words jump about in front of me. Publicly, I can never read a speech. I can only talk it. If you can, or somebody else can, who's a good reader. It's a beautiful poem. If somebody can read it in Punjabi and English, the translation we've done.
If somebody can read it in Punjabi, I've got it on my computer.
If they can't, then you read it in English. Thank you anyway. I'm muting myself again.
I will try this.
Shall I do it in English?
ਇੱਕ ਪਰਦੇਸੀ ਮਾਰ ਮੁਕਿਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹਦਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਦੇਸ਼ ਰਵਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵੇੜੇ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਸਵੇਰੇ ਖੁਸ਼ੀਆਂ ਵਾਲਾ ਚੰਨ ਸੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵੇੜੇ ਨੇਰ ਮਚਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ। ਸਾਡਾ ਦੀਨ ਐ ਦੀਨ ਅਮਨ ਦਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਨਾਰਾ ਏ, ਸਾਡਾ ਸੱਚ ਨੂੰ ਝੂਠਾ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਸਾਂਝ ਵਿਧਾਨ ਦੀ ਸਦਰ ਨਾਲ ਜ਼ਮਾਨੇ ਰੱਖਣੇ ਆ, ਕੈਦੀ ਸ਼ੈ ਤੇ ਡਾਕਾ ਲਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ। ਆਪਣੇ ਪਾਲਨ ਬਾਲ ਡਾਇਆ ਸੀ ਆਗੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਧਰਤੀ ਤੇ, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਬਲਦੀ ਆਗੇ ਡਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ। ਆਖਰੀ ਸ਼ੇਰ, ਮੇਰੇ ਕਲਮ ਨੇ ਜਦ ਦੀ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਸੁਖਨ ਅਮਨ ਦਾ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੈ, ਮੇਰੇ ਕਲਮ ਨੇ ਜਦ ਹੀ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੈ ਸੁਖਨ ਅਮਨ ਦਾ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੈ। ਨੋਹਾ ਮੈਥੋਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਲਿਖਵਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ, ਥੂ ਥੂ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਗ ਦੀ ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਪੱਲੇ ਪੈ ਗਈ ਏ। ਆਖਰੀ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਹੈ, ਕਿਹੜਾ ਜਗ ਨੂੰ ਰੰਗ ਵਿਖਾਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਹਿਸ਼ੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ।
Right? Everybody understood?
Yes.
Okay. If anybody wants to read in English, I've got it in my phone. Yeah. I think there is
Read the English out name.
no. So Tariq, everybody understands.
I don't believe you. It took me 2 dictionaries.
Okay. I think. Yeah.
Food is there.
Yeah. I'll just there is one more thing to do. There is Brother Kamar Abbas. He's the president of Tahreek-e-Kashmir, Birmingham. I will ask him to come forward and pray for international.
आ जाओ से गेस्ट हो सर, मुनाफ सब कर देंगे।
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह Allah accept our efforts. Allah accept our efforts. Those who are sitting here, those who are not sitting here, always support us, always with us, always stand with us. Please accept their efforts as well. Allah, you know better than us. Allah, many people who are struggling for their life, please help them. يا أخي الكريم برحمتك ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام عليكم.
Thank you very much. I think
अचानक
नहीं सही पड़ी
ठीक है long time.
While you're having your food, I can actually read it in English. Okay. Huh?